Welcome back to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're joining us again. I want you to imagine something for a second. Think of a guy you've known for like 20 years,
Okay, I'm picturing him.
right? And he's mild-mannered, incredibly flexible, just the kind of person who always goes with the flow, you
Yeah,
know?
totally.
But then suddenly he hits 45 or 50, and it's like a switch flips. He
Mm.
just becomes entirely uncompromising.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, if you disagree with him on something as trivial as like a movie or a restaurant choice, he treats it as this profound moral failing on your part.
Like you've deeply offended him.
Exactly. He starts acting like his perspective is literally the only one that exists. And society looks at this sudden transformation and we immediately diagnose it. We point our fingers and say, well, that's a massive midlife ego trip.
Right, because it's the easiest narrative to reach for, isn't it? It's the classic midlife crisis trope.
Totally.
We see someone who suddenly thinks they are, the absolute center of the universe. We see the stubbornness, the grandiosity, the complete inability to take feedback.
Yeah.
And we just assume their ego has inflated to the size of a blimp.
But when you actually dig into the cognitive science of what is happening in the human mind over, well, decades of adulthood, that simple diagnosis just completely unraveled.
It really does.
So we are taking a deep dive today into some research that honestly totally blew my mind. It's this academic paper titled Rethinking Ego Inflation in Midlife, Cognitive Rigidity, Self-Denial, the Continuity of the Self.
It's such a heavy title, but the concepts they're just so relatable.
Right. And the researchers are pointing out this fundamental flaw in how we view the aging brain. They offer a radically different explanation for why people become so, well, impossible to deal with in midlife. So our mission today is to dismantle that myth of midlife ego inflation, explain the actual science of cognitive rigidity, and hopefully give you a fresh, forgiving framework for understanding your own personal evolution.
And the central premise is actually a massive relief, I think, because it shifts our understanding from, a moral failing to a biological reality.
Yes. Okay, let's unpack this because this is where it gets really good.
What's fascinating here is that the researchers argue we are witnessing the symptoms of arrogance, sure, but we are completely misinterpreting the underlying cause.
Because it isn't the ego getting bigger at all, right?
Not at all. What is actually happening is that the brain's menu of cognitive choices is shrinking. It's getting smaller.
It's like, okay, think of it like a computer running out of RAM.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right, like if you open 40 tabs on your web browser and then you try to run a heavy video editing program and, I don't know, play a video game all at once.
Your fan starts spinning out of control.
Exactly. But the computer doesn't suddenly become arrogant when it freezes, it's just completely exhausted. It defaults to the simplest, most rigid background program just to survive the sheer processing load.
It's in survival mode.
Yeah, the brain isn't becoming an egomaniac. It's just trying to save energy because it's exhausted by a lifetime of running mismatched software.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Because human cognition, when it is healthy and functioning with plenty of bandwidth, it's designed to juggle multiple possible interpretations of reality at the same time.
Like having all those tabs running smoothly.
Exactly. You can hold your own perspective, you can consider someone else's, weigh the context, and find a really nuanced middle ground.
Which is great, but that takes work.
An enormous amount of work. That flexibility requires just a massive amount of metabolic and cognitive energy.
And life does a pretty brutal job of draining that energy over time.
It really does.
The paper actually lists out these prolonged, intense conditions that basically act as a slow leak on our cognitive RAM. You have chronic stress, for one.
Right, which puts the nervous system in a constant state of alert.
Yeah. And then you have physical fatigue, plus just the undeniable biological realities of aging.
Not to mention the ever-increasing weight of social and financial responsibility that just presses down on you year after year.
But the most fascinating drain on that energy, and I think maybe the most tragic, is what the researchers call the long-term occupation of roles inconsistent with one's natural temperament.
Yeah, that part is so crucial.
I want to pause on that for a second because it resonated so deeply with me.
Yeah.
We're basically talking about playing a character for 20 years.
Yes, exactly that. Picture an incredibly introverted, deeply creative person who, just out of financial necessity, takes a job in cutthroat corporate middle management.
Oh man, that sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. For 20 years, they have to wake up, put on a suit, and project this aggressive, extroverted dominance in endless meetings.
Or like, think of someone who is naturally spontaneous and free-spirited, but they end up in a highly regimented administrative life.
Yes. Every single day, they are forcing their brain to run software that is completely incompatible with their natural hardware.
The sheer friction of that would be, it would just be exhausting. You are essentially fighting your own baseline personality for decades just to pay the mortgage.
Exactly. And when the cognitive system is under that kind of relentless, invisible pressure, it just cannot maintain the flexible juggling act anymore. The bandwidth is gone.
It's all used up.
So the brain starts to rely repeatedly on the exact same cognitive patterns because they require the least amount of effort.
Because it's the path of least resistance.
Precisely. Over time, all those alternative, nuanced interpretations of reality that you used to be able to access, they become literally inaccessible. You aren't choosing to be stubborn. Your mind is simply losing its cognitive flexibility.
Which totally explains why reasoning with someone in that hyper-rigid state feels like talking to a brick wall. You are asking them to run a program for nuance and empathy that they literally do not have the memory to open.
When that bandwidth vanishes, the brain has to find a shortcut. It has to default to something.
So what does this all mean? Because those shortcuts aren't pretty, are they?
No, they really aren't.
Is that why we see people suddenly lashing out or having these intense emotional outbursts that seem totally out of character?
That is the direct result of the system defaulting to low energy states. The people around this person, and honestly, often the person themselves, they mistake these intense surges for sudden personality changes.
They're like, where did this come from?
Exactly. They wonder where all this hostility or grandiosity came from. But the research is very clear on this mechanism. These are not newly created impulses.
Really?
No, they have always existed within the cognitive system as latent possibilities.
Wait, so we all just have this dormant hostility waiting in the wings. Does this imply we've just been white-knuckling our true, darker desires for decades, and we finally just get too tired to hold them back?
Well, it is tempting to view it as the mask slipping, you know?
Yeah.
But that implies these darker impulses are our true selves, which isn't accurate.
Oh, okay, so it's not some hidden evil identity.
No, it is much more mechanical than that. It is simply a shift in probabilities within a fatigued system. Look at the specific feelings that tend to emerge when the brain is exhausted.
Like anger.
Yes, sudden surges of anger, an intense need for recognition, dominance, sexual desire, resentment, feelings of superiority, and a profound sense of victimhood.
But why those specific emotions? I mean, why doesn't the exhausted brain default to overwhelming joy or profound inner peace? That sounds nice.
It does sound nice, but it comes down to computational cost. Nuance, empathy, and understanding, those are high-energy cognitive states.
Oh, because you have to think about someone else.
Right. To be empathetic, you have to suppress your own immediate needs, simulate another person's emotional state in your own mind, compare the two, and then generate a measured response. It is a wildly complex internal algorithm.
Wow, when you put it like that, it sounds exhausting.
It is. Anger, on the other hand, is computationally cheap. It is a primal, low-energy, highly efficient shortcut. Dominance is cheap. Victimhood is cheap.
Because they require zero perspective taking. It's just about you.
Exactly. Under ordinary, well-rested conditions, those raw impulses are outcompeted by more balanced interpretations.
Because you have the energy to suppress them.
Right. But when you are exhausted from 20 years of stress and playing a mismatched role, the selection process changes. The system is just too tired to do the complex math of emotional regulation.
That makes a terrifying amount of sense, honestly. The impulse to just be angry is so much easier than the impulse to be understanding. It's the path of least resistance for a tired mind.
And this leads to a critical distinction. Having these resurfacing impulses like feeling a sudden surge of anger or that raw desire for control, it isn't inherently pathological.
It's just biology.
Yes. These are natural components of the human cognitive system. They are accumulated adaptive responses that helped our ancestors survive. The impulse itself is not the villain here.
Right. The danger arises when our exhausted, rigid cognitive system tries to make sense of these raw impulses and justify them to the world. And the researchers outline this progression that leads to what they call cognitive fixation.
It's a very specific spiral.
Yeah, and reading through it gave me chills because I have absolutely done this.
Oh, we all have. Every single one of us.
The progression starts as a simple temporary state.
Yeah.
You experience a physiological surge and think, I am angry.
Which is totally fine. Getting annoyed at a coworker or, a slow driver is a normal Tuesday.
But in a state of cognitive rigidity, the brain locks onto that state.
Yes, it can't process the context that maybe the coworker's having a bad day or the driver is lost. So I'm angry gradually hardens into a rigid stance, which is I am right.
And once you believe you are objectively right, the situation turns adversarial. If I am right, then the logical conclusion is that others are wrong.
Which brings us to the final and really the most dangerous stage. The stance hardens into a complete worldview. My anger is morally justified.
That's a huge leap.
It is. At this stage, anger ceases to be a passing emotion. It becomes the very framework through which this person interprets reality itself. This is the essence of cognitive fixation.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's the role of morality in all this that really flips our usual understanding upside down.
How so?
Well, we love to tell ourselves that we use objective reasoning to arrive at our conclusions, right? We think we survey the facts and then decide how to feel. But human cognition rarely works that way.
No, it really doesn't.
The body, the physiological state, generates the conclusion first.
Yes, the physical sensation of anger or exhaustion hits your nervous system before a single conscious thought is formed.
It's like drawing a bullseye around an arrow you already shot.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You feel the physiological impulse of anger first. So the arrow hits the wall, and then your brain panics and uses morality to paint the target around it so you look like a perfect shot.
That is a perfect analogy.
The actual sequence of events is that you are just in a physiological state that predisposes you toward anger, but your brain quickly generates this narrative. I am angry because justice demands it.
And here's the crucial part. To the individual experiencing this, only that second explanation is conscious.
They don't know they're faking it.
No, they are not sitting there maliciously plotting to deceive anyone. They truly believe they are acting on pure, undeniable moral principle. The cognitive system constantly seeks internal consistency.
It wants to make sense of itself.
Right. And when this moral justification happens repeatedly, expressing the hostility actually becomes psychologically rewarding. It feels good. It reinforces the belief that this anger isn't just acceptable, it's virtuous.
Man, that is a profound form of self-deception. When you feel that rush of self-righteousness, you're actually getting a dopamine hit for being rigid.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how this scales up and explains so much of our societal polarization. When morality is unconsciously hijacked just to legitimize our exhausted emotional impulses, people lose the capacity to recognize that their interpretation of reality is just one possible interpretation among many.
Because if my anger is a universal moral truth, then there is absolutely no room for debate. You are either with me or you are evil.
Exactly. The societal implications are massive.
They are, but it's equally destructive on an individual level, because eventually a person in midlife might realize that this framework, this rigid, angry, exhausted state, is making them completely miserable.
Yeah, they realize they're pushing everyone away.
Right. They're alienated from their family, frustrated with their career, and they want out. So they attempt to solve the problem by doing a complete 180-degree turn. They decide to completely reject their past.
Ah, the classic midlife reinvention. They buy the sports car, quit the job, get the divorce, and declare they have finally found the real them.
Yes. The researchers refer to this as radical self-denial, and they argue it is actually a massive logical trap.
Wait, how is reinventing yourself a trap?
Well, people in this state have this intense tendency to divide their life into two distinct eras. There's the old fake me versus the real me.
Right.
They look at their history and conclude, everything I believed and did before this exact moment was completely wrong. They want to burn the old house down and walk away without looking back.
But wait, I'm stuck on this. If I can't look back at my 20-year-old self or my 30-year-old self and say, wow, I was a total idiot, how am I supposed to measure my own growth?
That's a fair point.
Isn't it a universal sign of growth to look back and cringe at your past self? Are we not allowed to look at our past and say, wow, I was totally wrong?
That is the exact tension the researchers address, because acknowledging mistakes is absolutely necessary for growth. Recognizing where your previous interpretations failed is healthy.
Okay, great.
But radical self-denial is different. It is a wholesale rejection, a sweeping declaration that the past self was entirely false and delusional. And from the perspective of cognitive continuity, that creates an irreconcilable logical contradiction.
How so?
Well, think about the current self, this so-called real you doing all the condemning. That version of you only exists because your previous cognitive system produced it.
Oh,
You are using the exact cognitive architecture, the lessons learned, and the resilience built by your past to invalidate your past. It's a form of self-reference that just collapses on itself.
oh, wow. It's like, okay, it's like using a ladder to climb onto a roof, and once you get up there, you look down at the ladder and declare that ladders are structurally unsound, completely fake, and have never worked.
Yes,
But you're literally standing on the roof because of it.
that is the perfect analogy, and this creates what they call an infinite regress. If today's self has the absolute authority to declare yesterday's self entirely false, then what happens tomorrow?
Tomorrow's self does the same thing.
Exactly. Tomorrow's self will look back at today's self and declare it false just as easily. To stop this endless, terrifying loop of self-invalidation, a person has to arbitrarily draw a line in the sand and assume, okay, yesterday was fake, but this current version of me is finally absolutely the correct one.
Which is just another act of unquestioned certainty. It's a delusion of absolute correctness.
Precisely. You are demanding that your current self be exempt from the exact same skepticism you just ruthlessly applied to your past self.
Which is intellectually dishonest.
It is. It's
Yeah.
really just another form of cognitive rigidity masquerading as liberation.
So, if we can't completely reject our past selves without falling into that delusional loop, how are we supposed to view our personal history? What does actual, genuine growth look like from a cognitive systems perspective?
The researchers argue that genuine maturity is neither self-denial, burning the past to the ground, nor is it unconditional self-affirmation, where you blindly celebrate every terrible choice you've ever made.
Right.
Genuine maturity is integration.
Integration. Okay, what does that actually look like in practice?
It requires extending a profound amount of empathy to your past self by recognizing the constraints they were operating under. Integration acknowledges that your past self was not acting irrationally.
They weren't just being stupid.
No. They were simply the best available adaptation based on the conditions of that specific time.
That is incredibly forgiving. Because when we judge the choices we made a decade ago, we tend to judge them using the information we have now. We forget what it actually felt like to be that person.
We completely ignore the cognitive landscape of the past. What was your available knowledge back then? What was your accumulated life experience?
What were your physical condition, your emotional development, the environmental constraints you were facing?
Exactly. When you look back at a bad relationship or, say, a poor career choice, integration allows you to say, at that time, based on the limited information I had, the stress I was under, and the emotional tools available to me, that was the only interpretation my cognitive system could reasonably produce.
Man, if you are listening to this right now and you are currently feeling stuck in your career, or if you're beating yourself up over choices you made a decade ago, this is your permission to give yourself some grace.
Absolutely.
You were operating on the best software you had at the time. You literally did not have the RAM to make a different decision.
Integration recognizes three fundamental truths. Every past state had its own rationality based on its conditions, every present state is inherently limited, and every future state will continue to evolve.
It's all connected.
True maturity allows you to invite all those past versions of yourself to the table. You recognize that they built the foundation you are standing on right now.
Because the end goal of midlife development isn't about reducing the ego or glorifying it. The actual developmental task is recovering cognitive flexibility.
That is the ultimate prize. When you recover your bandwidth, those primal impulses, the fear, the ambition, the anger, the desire for dominance, they don't magically vanish.
Because you're still human.
Exactly. They remain available to you, but they are no longer mistaken for absolute reality. You can feel a surge of anger without becoming the anger. Your cognitive system regains its elasticity, and you can see multiple interpretations of reality once again.
You aren't trapped in a single rigid worldview. It is about recognizing when you are running on empty and embracing the continuous, messy, evolving timeline of exactly who you are.
This raises an important question for anyone listening.
Let's hear it.
What stands out to you? How might your life change if you stopped trying to kill off your past selves and instead invited them to the table?
That's a powerful reframing. Because wrapping up today, the core takeaway from this paper is that the central task of midlife is not about taming an expanding ego. It's about fighting cognitive rigidity, recovering your mental flexibility, and embracing the continuous timeline of who you are.
And we've learned that moral certainties are often just post hoc justifications for an exhausted cognitive system. So I want to leave you with this final lingering thought. Think about a deeply held, unquestionable belief you currently hold about yourself, or maybe about the people around you. Is it possible that belief is actually just a symptom of being tired? Imagine how differently you might interpret reality if your cognitive system was simply well rested.
Makes you wonder. Maybe you just need to turn the engine off for a while and let it cool down. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a little more breathing room and a new way to look at your own evolution. Take care of yourself.